Hello and welcome to this video. I have been fascinated with the concept of subjectivity and objectivity in art and music. Can we say that something is objectively good? Well, as soon as you say that, that doesn't seem right. We're all different people. We all like different things. If we like something different, doesn't mean that that's wrong. You can't be wrong with the things you like. And so that seems the obvious knee-jerk response to that. But then we think about it, we think, yeah, but the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix, surely they are objectively better than just some cruddy band that's made up of people who've only been playing the instruments for 6 months that are just playing in a bar and have never written a song in their life. Surely the one is better than the other. I am fascinated with that contradiction, that dichotomy that exists in the arts. And I think the arts are fundamentally trying to deal with that dichotomy. But that's another video. There's 100 videos out there on my channel that explore that. To explore this idea more deeply and in a different way, I created a machine called the SUPER I OMETER. Now, what the SUPER I OMETER is a machine that you could give it 10 parameters, and then it will rate any artist, any musician, anything really, based upon those 10 parameters. It will give you a score. It doesn't know the outcome. You don't know the outcome. It is just purely what we could call objective. Now, those scores are very subjective. We're still making subjective decisions, but when we use a SUPER I OMETER, the fact is that we do not know the outcomes, so it takes our biases out. Right, so it takes our subjective opinions and maps those into an overall objective view, thus bringing the two things together. Now, the big question is, who is the greatest band of all time? That's the thing I really want to know, and it's troubled me on this channel. Since I invented the SUPER I OMETER, I have wanted to solve this and come up with the absolute objective greatest band of all time. And I couldn't think of a way of doing it. How could I use a SUPER I OMETER that only works in 10 parameters and can only really deal with 2 bands at the same time? How do you put all the bands that have ever existed into it and get it to do all that stuff? It's too much. The SUPER I OMETER, of course, could do this. Any of you are aware of how the SUPER I OMETER works knows that it could do this. But the energy required to do this may well destroy our civilization as we know it. So, you know, I realised that that's quite a serious thing. And then I had this idea. And it came when I thought about the word greatness. We're not talking about the best. We're not talking about the most virtuoso or the most virtuous. We're not talking about the most influential. We are talking about the greatest. And greatest suggests greatness. And greatness suggests hugeness, vastness. So I thought I could cut down this decision by just looking at the 10 biggest selling artists of all time. Now, when it comes to objective decisions about art, popularity is a pretty good measure. Now, if we look at the most popular bands in music history, the ones that sold the most, we don't come up with the most commercial. So for me, it takes commerciality out of it. I think it's measuring something deeper than that. So what I'm going to do on this, I'm going to take the 10 biggest selling bands of all time, and I'm going to rank all 10 of them based upon 10 different criteria. We're going to go criteria. Did that make sense, Andy? Do you want to say that again? We're going to go criteria by criteria for the 10 bands, and then we're going to get a set of scores, and there will be a winner in each band, and then we will add all the scores up, and we will come up with an absolute winner. Now, at the moment, I don't know who that's going to be. You don't know who that's going to be. And the only thing that's going to dictate this is the SUPER I OMETER's objective view of who is the best of the worst within these parameters. We've actually got something to measure now. Now, the one parameter it won't be measuring is popularity, because all these bands have got into this list of the 10 biggest selling bands. But it's going to be measuring a number of different criteria, which we will go through as we go through them. So I hope you understand this very complex and overly detailed introduction to this video. And if you've followed all that and you understand how the SUPER I OMETER works, right, then we can proceed. So first of all, I've got to tell the superiometer what we're doing. Superiometer?
Yes.
Good. Are you listening?
Yes.
Good. What I want you to do today is a difficult task. I don't want you to look at 2 bands. I want you to look at 10 bands. Can you do that?
Yes.
Okay. So you need to know what the 10 bands are in ascending order of popularity. All right. So, okay. So the 10th biggest selling band, I shouldn't be talking to you, I should be telling the superiometer. Superiometer, the 10th biggest selling band is Metallica.
Yes.
The 9th biggest selling band of all time is actually Aerosmith.
Yes.
The 8th biggest selling band of all time is U2.
Yes.
The 7th biggest selling band of all time is the Eagles.
Yes.
The 6th biggest selling band of all time is AC/DC.
Yes.
The 5th biggest selling band of all time is the Rolling Stones.
Yes.
The 4th biggest selling band of all time, representing progressive rock, is Pink Floyd.
Yes.
The 3rd biggest selling band of all time is the mighty Led Zeppelin.
Yes.
The 2nd biggest selling band of all time is Queen.
Yes.
And of course, the biggest selling band of all time, and the likely favourite to win this, is at number 1, the Beatles. So can you put all of those into your superiometer?
Yes.
That superiometer is doing its work, and it's best to just leave it to do that until it comes up with something. Oh, that's good. Well, so we've got all that sorted out now, so we can proceed. Shall we proceed? Right. So, the first one's the obvious one. It's one that I tend to focus on quite a lot here, and what fans of progressive rock and jazz fusion tend to focus on, and that is technical ability. So, superiometer, can you just send over to here? I've got a little readout here, which will tell me the order once they get. So, can you send out the results for technical ability applied to those bands?
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting. At the lowest, the one with the least technical ability, according to superiometer, is the Rolling Stones, and I think that's about right. They are pretty poor musicians. They get rated as being quite good. Now, I think the superiometer is going on the sort of the classic lineup. Later on, when they got Mick Taylor, he was a pretty good musician. Of course, they've got Darryl Jones and Stanley Jones, these jazz players now, who are phenomenal. But I don't think we're talking about, that short period in the 1960s and early 70s when, the Rolling Stones meant something. So I think they definitely have the least technical ability. The next one, sorry about my wife, is shouting in the background. She's trying to get my daughter to do something. That's what you're going to get. Normally, I shoot these in the morning when you don't get that sort of thing, but I'm shooting this in the afternoon. It's very hot here as well, so everyone's very grumpy in the house. And not as grumpy as some of you are going to be when I get to the end of this. It doesn't agree with what you say, so... shall we? And am I sweating? Oh, I'm stressed of this. So anyway, the next most technically able is U2. I think that's probably about right. And then the third most technically able is the Beatles. They weren't really virtuoso musicians at all. They were okay, but not compared to some of the people on this list. The fourth is Pink Floyd. Again, middling musicians. I think that's one of the reasons why, progressive rock fans sometimes will not allow Pink Floyd into the progressive rock group, because their music isn't technically challenging enough. So I think that's fair enough for them to come in at 4. At 5, we have Aerosmith. Reasonable players, I think. We're starting to get there. Number 6, we've got AC/DC. I think that Angus Young is a much greater guitarist than he's giving credit. I think he's a pretty chopsy guitarist, actually, but he chooses to play in a very rock and roll way. And he learnt that from his brother Malcolm Young, who was also that as well. Phil Rudd's groove's impeccable, and their singers, both Bon Scott and Brian Johnson, are absolutely incredible. So I think we're starting to get into the sort of technical realm with AC/DC at number 6. At number 5... No, I've got that wrong. So AC/DC with number 6 and number 5. So it proves I'm not making this up. I've got that. Aerosmith at number 5. That's fair enough. I think they're together, really. Pink Floyd at number 4. So at number 3, I'm going... Right. I've gone wrong here. What I'm doing is I've now inverted the score. Superiometer, when you're saying number 1 is 1, that's the worst, isn't it?
Yes.
Right, so where were we? We were at AC/DC. We was at number 6. So the next one would be number 7, which is Metallica.
Hello, viewers. This is Andy Edwards. I'm editing this at the moment and I'm watching it, and I've got to be honest, it's not great at all. I mean, I don't know what the hell's going on. I'm getting confused. It's badly explained. And on top of that, you've got my wife shouting in the background and all manner of confusing things happening. I do apologise. All I can say is, can you just stick with it? Because I do think I get a little bit better. If I don't, I will jump in as the video goes on and try and offer a bit of support. But I hope from now on it starts to get out of this sort of rut of just mediocre ineptitude that I seem to have found myself in. The difficult thing with this is, using the superiometer and trying to juggle with 10 bands is just a little bit beyond me, but just bear with it and I'm sure we're going to get there. So we'll now return to video. Thank you for bearing with me so far, and hopefully you'll get something out of this in the end. Thank you very much.
Metallica are very good players, in my opinion. I think Lars Ulrich gets bashed when he shouldn't. He had a technical ability enough to push drumming forward in the 80s. James Hetfield is an incredible heavy metal rhythm guitarist, one of the greatest. Kirk Hammett is a reasonable guitarist who's took lessons with Joe Satriani. And their bass players have just got better. And the guy that's from Suicidal Tendencies, the Robert Trujillo, he is very, very incredibly good. So, yeah, we got Metallica at number 7. So next one will be number 8, which is the Eagles. Eagles are very good players, and I think the vocal harmonies of the Eagles really propel them, which are absolutely immaculate. If you hear a live recording of the Eagles, if they are actually playing it, because there's been some question of that recently. Oh, shall we just move on? The Eagles, I think, are almost like on a session level in terms of playing. So they've come at number 8. Number 9 is Queen, and rightfully so. The incredible vocals of Freddie Mercury. And then all those musicians are very good, but undoubtedly the greatest of the technicians on this is Led Zeppelin, who've come in at number 10. So the winners of the first category is Led Zeppelin, and the losers are the Rolling Stones. Shall we move on to the second category? So the second category is the good to bad ratio, all right? So that means how many bad albums did they make and how many good albums did they make? All right? Sorry about my wife shouting in the background. I'm trying my best here. Danny, I'm making a YouTube video. All this will be on YouTube. All this will be on YouTube. She doesn't care. She says good. But just carry on. If you can live with it, I can live with it. Let's move on to the second category. Good to bad, right? So, some bands, every album's a masterpiece. Some bands have had some great albums, but there's a lot of junk there. Now, on here, the worst in terms of good to bad, again, is the Rolling Stones, who've come out at number 1. I think a lot of their 60s albums are a little bit patchy. There is nothing in their catalogue that equals, I think, like an Abbey Road, perhaps, or a Dark Side of the Moon. There's some very, very good albums and interesting albums. But especially in the early days, it's a hodgepodge, of singles and stuff like that. There is a run at the late 60s of some really great albums. In the early 70s, things like Goat Said Soup and Sticky Fingers are great albums. I do not rate Exile on Main Street at all. But once they get into the mid-70s, you see a slow downward turn as they just almost become a parody of themselves. And they were a parody of themselves pretty much 40 years ago, with a few interesting bits here and there. I think that is warranted to say the Rolling Stones have the greatest good to bad ratio. Right, so that's at number 1. At number 2, I've got U2. I think people who are in the know think that the first album's good, the second, third album's very, very good, like almost like masterpiece level, running up to the Joshua Tree, and there's a mixed response. I think that's a masterpiece album. And then there's a downward turn. The last great album they did was Acton Baby, which is like 30 years ago. And again, we've had 30 years of them just being this great big sort of legacy band, stadium-filling legacy band, multi-millionaires, just swatting about being multi-millionaires, a little bit like the Rolling Stones. Bands can outstay their welcome, and those that get out quick, like the Police, right, who never made a bad album. Every Police album is absolute work of genius, but they're not on this list, but they would be getting 10 out of 10. So the moral of this one is don't outstay your welcome, because it will diminish your greatness. Number 3, we've got Aerosmith. Again, I don't actually think their classic 70s albums are that good. There's some really good tracks, and then the drugs take over and they're pretty awful. When they come back in the 80s, yes, they sell a ton of records, but they're not writing those records, are they? Permanent Vacation is one of my favourite rock albums of all time. Pump, I would say, is slightly overrated. You know, but I think Rocks, Get Your Wings, Toys of the Attic, and Permanent Vacation, those 4 albums for me are greater than the Rolling Stones albums, you know, because I'm not a massive Rolling Stones fan, and I am an Aerosmith fan. That's the way it is. Right, so at number 4, we've got Metallica. Again, it's a similar story, isn't it? First album's a bit rough and ready, then Ride the Lightning, masterpiece, Master of Puppets, masterpiece, and Just for All, some think's a masterpiece. Some think it's not that well recorded. I think it is. I think it is a masterpiece. Then they did the Black Album, one of the biggest selling rock albums. That's another one of these commercial turning points. And then then you get Load, and you get all these things that everybody hates. Their last album was a return to form, I think. But yeah, there is a lot of dross within the good when it comes to Metallica at number 4. At number 5, we've got AC/DC again. First album is they're getting their sound. By the time they get Dirt Deeds done dirt cheap, you got masterpiece, and then you got Let There Be Rock, masterpiece, and then you've got High Voltage. No, not High Voltage. Well, come on, Power Age is a masterpiece. If You Want Blood, a masterpiece. Highway to Hell, a masterpiece. Back in Black, masterpiece. For those about to rock, just teetering under masterpiece. And again, 40 years ago. And then they just slammed it out. Now, those albums are pretty good. After those, there's some really good, strong AC/DC albums. And I think the quality, it's not turgid or dross or just going through the motions. They've done some really good albums, some great tracks. You know, they've had some big hits, you know. And so I think AC/DC's, the quality drops off a bit, which is why we've got them coming at number 5. And at number 6, we've got Pink Floyd. Now, I have had a go at Pink Floyd, saying that there is not so high a good to bad ratio as people think. But there's less albums, they're more considered. And I think what I'm doing there when I'm bringing this up, I'm pushing up the idea that comes from Pink Floyd fans that they can do no wrong, and they can do some wrong. And the thing with Pink Floyd is after the genius of the Syd Barrett album, the first album, they do lose their way, and they cover it up by being avant-garde and psychedelic. And I don't think that stuff is as good as people make out. By the time we get to, I would say, Atom Heart Mother, and then Medal, we're on the way to some pretty close to brilliant albums. And then there is The Run, Dark Side of the Moon, Animals, and Wish You Were Here, which are utter masterpieces. The Wall is a flawed masterpiece and has lost its cred since then, as well as The Final Cut, which was sort of disliked at the time, has gone up. And then we've got the 1980s and 1990s albums, which are more like Dave Gilmour albums, and the Roger Waters Bite is gone, you know, but they're by no means bad albums, right? So I think that's fair to have Pink Floyd at number 4. At number, I have Pink Floyd at number 6. So we've had 5, 6. So at number 7, we've got the Eagles. The Eagles are interesting because they do a much more concise run of albums. There's some really huge hit records. They're a much quieter band. They're not pulled into this sort of whole rock and roll circus thing that all these other bands are in. And all those bands are high quality. And then once they've done it, they exit the 70s, they're out. They did come back together to make an album later on. I wish I knew enough about the Eagles to tell you what these titles are, but off the top of it, I can't. But that is my take on the Eagles. Hotel California is not my thing, but it's an absolute classic album. But none of the albums are terrible albums. And many of the albums have a ton of really great hit records on. Even I know that with my limited knowledge of the Eagles. So I think the fact they got out at the right time and then they came back and did a one album and they did it properly, and that's a good album. I think they just deserve to be at number 7. At number 8, we've got Queen. Again, I've gone through all the Queen albums. They're pretty good, actually. They really do. make a whole ton of brilliant albums. When they get to the game in 1980 and they enter the 80s, there's a little bit of a wobble. I think they're undone a little bit just by the 80s production, listening back now. But a lot of people love those albums. So I think that's justly deserved that we've got Queen at number 8. At number 9, we've got Led Zeppelin, which I think is without a doubt. I think every album by Led Zeppelin is a masterpiece. I think Presence is a masterpiece. I am not a fan of In Through the Outdoor, but that is because I'm comparing it to all their other albums. I think Coda's absolutely brilliant. All the live albums are really good. Song Remains the Same is when we say Song Remains the Same, it's like we do that. Go and listen to it. Go and listen to Days Confused. Go and listen to Stairway to Heaven on there. Go and listen to them jamming on the back of Whole Lot of Love and tell me it's not incredible. Right, so Led Zeppelin, yeah, pretty close to having a full set. And of course, at number 10, we've got the Beatles, who really could do no wrong. Even when they were signed by EMI in the early days and they were having to go in and do their album in one day, and and it was just a collection of their singles and all that type of stuff. If you really get into it, there is no bad albums. There is no mediocre albums. There's good albums, very good albums, and masterpieces. So the Beatles rightly come out at number 10 on the second criteria, which was the good to bad ratio. The third criteria is how good are they live? Are they actually a decent band? Can they get in front of the audience and deliver the goods? The worst on this list I have got is the Beatles, and I think that's about right. Now, the Beatles have this reputation of being quite a good covers band out in Hamburg, but that's all hearsay. I think they were a pretty tight band, but they didn't like delivering it live, and I think that drops them down. When they did go out and play live, due to the lack of power in the PAs at that time, they just couldn't deal with the shouting fans, and they gave up. Towards the end of their career, when they were doing Let It Be, they did one more gig where they climbed up on top of Abbey Road recording studios and did a gig to the people out in the streets, and they sound okay, but they are not Jimi Hendrix, they are not Cream. So I think that's right, and I think I think they were a great band, a great performing band, but the evidence is not necessarily there in the gigs. That's the thing. Anyone who went to a Beatles gig, all they heard was a bunch of people screaming next to them. So I think that is about right. We're dealing with the biggest selling bands. All these bands are going to be brilliant at performing. I think Led Zeppelin are the least. Number 2, we've got Metallica. I've heard enough live stuff of Metallica to know that there is a lot of fiddling and diddly when it comes to their live albums, and I think that is their downfall. I think this is where Lars Ulrich's reputation falls, and the internet has shown that up. So I think, yes, I don't think Metallica are a brilliant live band. In the early days when they did Master of Puppets, they did lots and lots of takes. They ran a lot of tape, and there was a lot of 2-inch tape edits on those albums to get that performance out of them. At number 3 on the list, the superiometer has got the Eagles. Now, the Eagles' performances are immaculate, but my God, this doesn't just measure how well it sounds like the record. This measures being able to deliver it to the audience, right? And the Eagles just don't have that visceral rock energy, which I think is essential for getting a mark. They are very good. They are up against, some incredible bands. Say at number 4, we have U2. U2 are incredible performers. Their live show combined with their sort of the magneticness of the performance and the way, Bono can hold the audience shows how good all these bands are, and shows that U2 being at number 4 is not a bad thing, because at number 5 above them we have Pink Floyd. Again, a very sort of non-entity performing band, but their live show is absolutely incredible, and things like The Wall are that tour was monumental, and yet they're still only going to come in at number 5. At number 6 we have Aerosmith. I saw Aerosmith live. It was mind-blowing. In terms of performance, it was mind-blowing. I came in, sat down, there was this great big curtain surrounding the stage, and then there was all this rumbling, and the band kicked in, and the curtain span down, and the band just seemed to leap out of the audience. And I remember Steven Tyler came down like Dude Looks Like a Lady with his microphone stand, doing that sort of galloping down as he went. They were posing, they were occupying the stage. So yes, we've got Aerosmith coming at number 6. At number 7, we had Led Zeppelin. Now, I would have thought this would come in higher, but I think the superiometer is right here. Magnetic live performance sometimes. But when you go back and talk to people who are actually there, I think a lot of drink and drugs affected some of those performances, and they all were not always at their peak. I think bands like Deep Purple and Free that were contemporaries were much better as live performance at that time. But fair enough, they got number 7. At number 8 on this, we've got the Rolling Stones. Who's number 10? Oh, yeah. So I'm just checking what the superior says. So 8, we got the Rolling Stones, without a doubt. The shape and swagger of rock is the Rolling Stones. Aerosmith are doing the Rolling Stones when it comes to their live performance. Even Zeppelin are to some extent. So the Rolling Stones needs to be pretty high. And I think their guttural sort of non-virtuoso approach works better live. It sort of comes into it. There is a greasy groove about the Rolling Stones, which is great. So that's number 8. At number 9, we have, what's it, number 9? AC/DC. Astonishing. Rock solid, sounds like a record, and Angus does not break one step or 1 ounce of sweat. There he is, his head going up and down, his Chuck Berry kicks going up and down as he circles around the stage, and doesn't matter what he does, how he acts, he just is inside the music. The rest of the band, you know, they sit there locked in position. But, you know, Brian Johnson and Bon Scott were two of the greatest frontmen that has ever lived. So AC/DC, rightfully, I think, coming at number 9. And at number 10, we have Queen. Roger Taylor, incredibly charismatic drummer at the back there, singing and playing. Brian May with the big hair and the white suits coming out and stepping forward with his clogs on, with his delay going and doing these majestic guitar solos. John Deacon doing a John Paul Jones, just sitting there rock solid in the background. And then perhaps the greatest front person of all time, Freddie Mercury. And Freddie Mercury gets them a number 10 on that criteria. So we're moving on. So the next one is iconicness and charisma. You know, what do these people look like? What magnetism do they exude? You know, when they come out on stage, you know, there's charisma. What is it? Charisma and iconicness. In the recording studios where I work, there is an outline of one of the people on this list. Just an outline. When you walk in, you know exactly who that is from the outline. That is what we're talking about. Of course, the worst here is the Eagles, right? Does anyone even know what the Eagles look like? And if you do see what they look like, they probably look like sort of slightly hippified bank managers, perhaps. So the Eagles, without a doubt, come in at number 1. At number 2, we have Pink Floyd. You know, there's some iconicness there. I mean, you're going to give him points for Syd Barrett, who was incredibly charismatic, but he's there for 1 album. Number 3, we get U2. Now we're moving into a band that is pretty iconic, especially Bono and The Edge. You know, both very iconic musicians. You could. I think in most people, if you even The Edge, you could put a photograph of him on the cover of a magazine, and everyone's going to know who that is, even though it's the guitarist. I don't know about the other two so much. U2's number 4, number 5. So I'm the wrong one. So U2 were at this is a very complex readout from the superiometer. I just don't know if I've got the actual intelligence to deal with this. So who was I talking about then? U2. So U2 at number 3. So number 4 is Metallica. Relatively iconic. You know, not Jimi Hendrix, not Prince, not Michael Jackson, but they're there, number 4. I think they're so loved by so many people that if any of those musicians walked into a room, it will be electric. I think there's a high level of charisma there with that band. You know, every time one of my friends who's playing some rock festival, you know, bumps into James Hetfield and they get his arm and round them and they take a photograph of Facebook, you go, oh, wow, James Hetfield. So I think there's a certain level of charisma there that puts them at number 4. At number 5, we have Aerosmith. Without doubt, Steven Tyler and the guitarist, whatever his name is. There's a lot of names to remember here. Who's the guitarist in... I did a bloody thing on him the other day about how he made the worst album. I want to say Joe Elliott, but that's the singer of Def Leppard, and that was the name that came into my head. Joe Perry? That doesn't sound right now. That sounds like a snooker player. Anyway, both of those very iconic. I'm going to move on from there. There's a lot going on this video. It's hard for me. Number 6, AC/DC again. You know, if you wanted an encyclopedia of rock and you want to put one person on the front, you put Angus Young on. He's iconic enough to do it. And then you have Bon Scott and to some extent Brian Johnson. But Angus is just one of the most iconic images in rock music. So that places them at a very strong 6. So at 7, we've got Led Zeppelin. You know, the golden mane of the golden god stood up the front. You know, bare-chested, bulgy trousers. That's Robert Plant. And then you've got the inverse of that, the dark shadow of Jimmy Page at the side in his black dragon suit. You've got John Paul Jones on all the instruments sat in the background, rock solid. And then on drums, one of the greatest rock drummers of all time, one of the most charismatic rock drummers of all time, sat there with his headband on and his big moustache, John Bonham smacking the timpani. I don't think I can say timpani correctly. I do know how to say it. I said it in another video. It's timpani. I know it's timpani, but when I'm doing one of these videos, every time I come to say the word timpani, I want to say timpani, and it seems to go better with the majesticness of which the context is in that they're being mentioned on my video. So leave me alone. Right. So Led Zeppelin number 7. At number what we got 8. We got the Beatles. Without a doubt. At number 9. The Rolling Stones, even more iconic than the Beatles, I would say. And at number 10, of course, it's Queen again. Oh, Queen again. A lot of 10s here. And without a doubt, you know, Freddie Mercury. And that is the outline in the recording studio. It's an outline of Freddie Mercury on the wall, with his fist there, looking out with his legs apart. You know it when I say it. So that's without a doubt, I think we've got that right. So you agree that we're nearly halfway mark now, and this is some sort of objective list, isn't it? And we don't know what the outcome is until we add all this up. There's a lot of maths to add this all up. It's getting quite exciting. You're going to stay to the end, aren't you? Because you want to know.
This bit here, it's like I'm begging you to stay. You don't need to stay. If you want to go, go. Don't let me pressurise you. But let's get on with the show anyway.
Right, the next one is the lyrics and the deeper meaning. You know, some bands are just singing about having parties, and some people are really dealing with the existential quality of life, and they're trying to deal with the angst and the torment that we exist in, and act as a tonic to that, you know, through the cathartic effect of their deep, meaningful lyrics. So at number 1 on this list, deep meaningful lyrics, we got AC/DC. I think as an actual lyricist, especially Bon Scott, is very clever, but it's hard to give an argument about a band that, you know, wrote the song Big Balls, for example, or The Jack, you know, or Let Me Put My Love Into You. So I think, yeah, AC/DC probably got the least meaningful lyrics on here. And number 2 is probably Aerosmith, a little bit heavier. And when those lyrics are heavier, it's because they got someone writing them for you, you know. But walk this way, talk this way. You know, not the most intellectual stuff, is it? Number 3, we've got Queen. Queen's lyrics are interesting, but I would say it's in the true meaning of pretentious. They are pretentious. They're cool, but they're pretentious. I see a little silhouette of a man. Scaramouche, Scaramouche, let me do the fandango. Thunderbolts and lightning, very, very frightening. Galileo, Galileo, Galileo. Magnifico. It's just a lot of Italian words stuck together to sound like opera. And that's their greatest song of all time. So I think that's fair enough with Queen. You know, they've done well so far. So they got number 3. At number 4, we've got the Eagles. For deep, meaningful lyrics. I don't know whether that's true. You know, I think Hotel California, but it's the only thing I know by them. Seems okay. But they've been marked quite low there. At number 5, we've got the Rolling Stones. Now, I think the Rolling Stones do have some very cool lyrics, or covering a variety of subject matters. And I think what we're getting with the Eagles being lower is just the fact that... but is it... I mean, I don't know. I think the Rolling Stones have that. It's interesting. This is because we think of bands like AC/DC and Aerosmith for being raw rock and roll bands, and they have that sort of party type lyrics. But the Rolling Stones don't. They have a darkness to them, without a doubt. Yeah, I think this is right. I think if you think of something like "Gimme Shelter," that's without a doubt. I think the Rolling Stones should be above the Eagles. I think, you know, that. Those are iconic lyrics and fantastic. Number 5, we have the Rolling Stones. At number 6, we have Led Zeppelin. There's a lot of ooh push in Led Zeppelin songs, but Robert can also, if he wants, turn his hand to some very emotive lyrics, which he does probably the most emotive on All of My Love. But when you listen to something like Stairway to Heaven, do those lyrics actually mean anything, or don't they? But I think there is a space to put meaningful. I love the lyrics, and I've sat there, reading the lyrics of Zeppelin songs and getting into it. So I think that's fair. Number 6. At number 7, we've got Metallica. I saw Chris Cornell once live, and he sang by U2 the song One, that has some incredible lyrics, but he swapped the lyrics out for the lyrics of One by Metallica. And put into that context, you realise the darkness and the intent of Metallica. Recently, there was a video where Elton John came on, and he really threw accolades at Metallica in terms of their songwriting. And James Hetfield, I thought he was going to start crying. They are very good songwriters, Metallica are. That's why they're one of the biggest bands in the world. The lyrics are good, and that does stick them at number 7. At number 8, we've got U2, and those early things like Sunday Bloody Sunday and New Year's Day and all that's incredible, really incredible, heartfelt lyrics, and they deserve to be there at number 8. At number 9, we've got the Beatles. At number 9. But at number 10, the Super I OMETER has put Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd did not have a strong songwriter for the first few albums, but when Roger Waters kicked in, my God, those lyrics are incredible. And I'm not a lyrics person. Dark Side of the Moon, the subject matter of the lyrics on that is absolutely incredible. And I don't even think the Beatles are quite up to what Roger Waters was able to pull off in that band over those 3 albums. That really is the definition of heavy lyrics. So I think that's good that Pink Floyd's got a 10 finally on this. Right, the next one is a very important one. It's influence. The least influential band on this list is Aerosmith, which I think is the case. They are a derivative band. They're the pinch of Led Zeppelin, the pinch of the Rolling Stones. They do it very well. They bring in some country influences and more American influences. They sell a ton of records. So I think that's true at number 1. At number 2, we have the Eagles. Fair enough. I mean, who sounds like the Eagles? I'll tell you what sounds like the Eagles. Middle of the road, awful, bands like REO Speedwagon and all that nonsense. And they, I think that's fair enough. Eagles at number 2. Queen at number 3. Queen might just not be influential because Freddie's impossible to copy, so that might not be fair. But there's not that many bands that sang like Queen out there. 3 at number 4, we've got U2. Very influential at the time. I remember in the 80s there was a lot of bands following their lead from U2. Not so much now. At number 5, we've got AC/DC. Pretty iconic. We're in the middle now. Pretty influential. 5. At number 6, we got Pink Floyd. On the prog circuit, there's a million bands that sound like Pink Floyd. I think that's just deserved, but it's always a bad thing when that's the case. You've got to deal with the Pink Floyd influence lightly, because if you get it wrong, you turn into middle of the road dad rock. And when Roger Waters was in that band, they were able to never fall into that pitfall, which is of what you fall into when you fall into a pitfall, hence the name. Right, at number 7, we've got the Rolling Stones. Mightily influential, the blueprint for all sorts of different rock bands. So anything above this is going to be hitting pretty heavy. So at number 8, we have got Metallica. I mean, if I walk out here and go to a local rehearsal room and I find a metal band or a rock band playing, they will be influenced by Metallica. It's huge that the amount of influence they had on heavy rock and heavy metal. 8. At number 9, we've got Led Zeppelin, of course. Hugely influential. Everyone who wants to play the drums like John Bonham. Everybody, wants to sit there and be a rock god like Rob Plant and sing up high. And of course, Jimmy Page is the guitar hero of all time. So that's without a doubt. And of course, what we got at number 10 is the Beatles, the most influential band that there is, without a doubt, on every single level, right? The next one we've got is cultural impact. Now, this is an influence. This is the non-musical influence. This is how it influenced mainstream culture. If this starts to crop up, if these bands crop up in films or movies, or they affect haircuts or the way people dress, that is cultural impact, right? The least... band with the least cultural impact on this is the Eagles, of course, which are a non-entity in terms of that. Goes without saying. Number 2, Pink Floyd. There is some impact because their music's been used in a lot of films and there is an idea there, but it's still quite weak. And you've got to remember, we're talking with the greatest bands, and these bands are all truly great. Number 3, we've got Metallica. There is some cultural impact, but it's hard to spot when compared to some of the other bands on this list. At number 4, we've got U2. Yeah, I think, those huge tours, loads of big selling albums, but except for some parodies and South Park appearances, no, not really having that much impact on culture. So at number 5, we've got AC/DC. I think AC/DC more, we could imagine watching a Marvel film and an AC/DC track coming on and people getting it. I think that is definitely the case. We're moving there with AC/DC. Cultural impact, which are at number 7. So we're at number 5, we're there. Oh, God. 5. Number 6 is Led Zeppelin. Missed one out. And then number 7. At number 8, in cultural impact, we have the Rolling Stones. When we tell the history of rock and roll, so often the Rolling Stones will come in. What happened when they put the Hells Angels in charge at Altamont? All these certain things, the darkness that emerges out of it, the trials, the films, the acting, Mick Jagger in the films, all this stuff is there. So I think that's right for Pink Floyd to be coming up. Oh, God. It's hard to read this.
Just when you think I've got it together, this starts happening again. Andrew, pull yourself together and start concentrating on what you're trying to do. You're trying to do too much here. Just slow it down a little bit. I know you want to get it all in, but just slow it down and get a chance of getting somewhere.
You're only waiting around for me to get to the end now, aren't you? And that's why I'm trying to go fast. I'm trying to give some sort of entertainment here, but the only entertainment is me not being able to say what I want to say fast enough. Who are we even talking about then? The Stones, culturing about them, number 8. At number 9, we've got Queen. Queen has have so much cultural impact. You think of their appearance at Live Aid and the film that's just come out. They're that big that they can do that. Elvis Presley is the sort of person that gets their own film. Prince would be the sort of person to get their own film. And the case is the same for Queen. Of course, number 10 is the Beatles. That is probably the most cultural, impactful band in history. Right, the next one is compositional stroke songwriting skills. At number 1, we've got Aerosmith. Poor old Aerosmith, with their generic hackneyed sort of bluesy rock songs. Much better songs in the 80s, but of course they had a bit of help. And I don't think the Superior Amateur would count that. At number 2, we've got AC/DC. Very strong at what they do, and I think their arrangements are very good. But they are up against people like the Beatles and the Eagles here. At number 3, we have the Rolling Stones. There's some incredible songwriting with the Rolling Stones. At number 4, we have Led Zeppelin. I would say the Stones and Led Zeppelin, I would probably go for saying Led Zeppelin have written stronger songs than the Stones, but only just. I think Stairway to Heaven is an example of that. At number 5, we have, where's number 5? Pink Floyd. Strong songwriting, strong compositions, strong arrangements. None of these bands are it's like live performance. None of these bands are going to be able to do this. It's all right, I had a phone call. Sometimes that knocks the video out. So they're not going to be able to get on the list unless they can write good, decent songs. At number 6, we've got Metallica, strong songwriters. Number 7, U2, which I think are even stronger than Metallica and have written some classic songs. At number 8, we've got the Eagles, and that's their forte, is strong songs. At number 9, we've got Queen, incredible. And at number 10, we've got the Beatles. So the Beatles have won the last 3 categories. We're now down to nearly the last 2. This is nearly going to be over for you, and you can find out who the greatest band is. And then you will say, what a waste of time that was. Why did I watch all that? And you'll go away with that feeling that I didn't quite deliver. I know that's what I'm setting myself up from here, but you sat with it, and we're doing what we're doing. Right, groove and feel. The least groovy band on this is Metallica at number 1. Then at number 2, we've got Pink Floyd. They've got a nice groove, but it's not, chic, is it? At number 3, we've got U2. At number 4, then there's the Eagles. At number 5, we've got Queen. At number 6, we have got the Beatles. At number 7, we got the Rolling Stones. At number 8, we have Aerosmith. That's probably their highest score is for groove. Well, that's without Joe Kramer drumming, incredible. And then at 9, we've got Led Zeppelin. And at 10, we have AC/DC. I think that's fair enough in terms of groove and feel. Then we have my personal taste, which of course a superiometer knows. My least favourite band on this list would be a U2, then followed by the Rolling Stones, then the Eagles, then Aerosmith, who I do like and have some albums by, then Metallica that I like more, and then I've got Queen, who I really like, and then I've got at number 7 Pink Floyd, who I really like, and then at number 8 we have AC/DC, one of my favourite bands. I've got everything up until For Those About to Rock. And I haven't got High Voltage anymore. I didn't like that one. But I've got most of those albums. And of course, for me, at number 9, I've got the Beatles. And then at number 10, Led Zeppelin. So we have now finally got to the end of this list. So, superiometer, can you give me the final results so we can find out who the greatest band is of all time?
Yes.
The results are in. And I have them there. I'm now going to turn around and read them out for you in ascending order. That will mean from the lowest to the highest, for those of you who don't know what the word ascending means. Is this exciting now? Is it worth me not being able to speak properly and getting confused reading out this incredibly complex readout with all the equations I've got to deal with here for the superiometer? Anyway, so I'm just going to do a few button pressing. Oh, superiometer. That's better. Give it me in order. Right. So obviously, there's 10 categories and each one can get 10. So when you add them all up, it's out of 100. So right at the bottom, we have got U2 in 10th place. This is still the 10th greatest. U2, you should be pleased with yourself. You know how many bands are out there in the whole world? I've been in a million bands. Right, you've come out as the 10th greatest band. U2 at number 30 has got 38 points out of 100. Not number 38. Has got 30 out of 100. The Eagles and Aerosmith have tied for 8th place. No 9th place on this list with 41 out of 100. Metallica have come in at whatever the next one is, 7th place with 47 out of 100. Pink Floyd have come in at 6th place with 49 out of 100, only just pipping Metallica. A few points above them is the Rolling Stones with 52 out of 100. We're narrowing it down. AC/DC coming at number 4 with 59. Queen coming at number 72. So we are down to the 2, aren't we? And the superiometer has dealt with these bands in the past, but never using this criteria. We are down to the Beatles and Led Zeppelin. So let's get them up, shall we? So let's have here the Beatles. And now superiometer, let's have here the Led Zeppelin. Now, which one of these won out of this? Let's count it down.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The greatest band of all time is not the Beatles. And you thought it would be, even I thought it would be. The Beatles came in at 76 points, 76 out of 100. Led Zeppelin came in at 77. So the greatest band of all time now officially is Led Zeppelin. And when I say that, when I say the greatest band, I feel that Led Zeppelin is the greatest band of all time. I think that's right. There's a magic of those players. There's a magic of what they sounded like together. There's a magic in the music they made together, the albums that came out of that, the folklore, the whole of it. I think there is something about them that makes them more band-like and makes them more greater in a way than the Beatles, which to me seem like 4 mates having fun in a recording studio. The Beatles fall apart, and we know they fall apart from the last 3 years. Led Zeppelin never did. They all needed each other, and once John Bonham died in 1980, That was it. The band was over. They've come back together a few times, but they never really came back together. Anything under the Led Zeppelin name after 1980 is not really Led Zeppelin. We know it. That is the power of this band. There is only one Led Zeppelin. There is only one Led Zeppelin. Only one. There is only one Led Zeppelin. And if you like this video, stick a like on it now, even though it was a bit garbled because I had to get a lot of information in and it fried my little brain. So you should give me a like just for appreciate the fact that I got to the end of it. And if you want to see more of me confused, but Superior Ometer's come back. Didn't expect to see that, did you? So as fans of the Superior Ometer, subscribe. Tell us we want to see more Superior Ometers. People always like the Superior Ometers. And I have been approached by some quite intellectual academics who said the Superior Ometer is a very good idea and a very interesting ways of dealing with objectivity and subjectivity in the arts. Maybe that was my intention with it all along. Or maybe it wasn't. Who knows? Who knows what's going on in my head? I'll tell you something I don't. If you want to support me, you could come over and be a Patreon. And if you want to support me financially but not become a patron, say if you did enjoy this video and you want to support me financially, by like a little bit like I've just busked, because I have busked, I've sat here and made this up as I go along, as I always do. And if you like that and you want to, recompense me for my effort in this hot, sweaty day, then you could do that by dropping a little bit of money into my PayPal tip jar. I appreciate all the support I get from you all. I am only here fundamentally to try and entertain you. And then after that, inform you of music that you might not like and celebrate the music that you do like. And then thirdly, maybe just get you to think about stuff in a different way. So I can be a little bit contrarian and contentious. And those of you who appreciate that, I thank you very much. I really am all about world peace and love. I just want to say that at the end of this video. So let's all try and get along, shall we? Difficult times out there, and music is the thing that brings us together. So let us keep it that way. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next video.